Hello, good evening and welcome to the inaugural event of the series with the fearsomely evocative title, The Americans Are Coming. A one-week debate series pitting American evangelical speakers of Acts 17 ministries with experienced Muslim speakers living in the UK to share thoughts, ideas and present the case for their respective viewpoints in the presence of open criticism. Can you hear me okay at the back? You can. Great stuff. My name is Paul Williams. The debate series is hosted by the Muslim Debate Initiative, an intellectual, political, theological initiative formed by experienced Muslim researchers, debaters and speakers, aiming at encouraging inter-community debate, discussion and dialogue. MDI believes that only through frank and open debate can deeper understanding be gained of relationships between different relations between different communities be improved, and hopefully the breaking down of prejudice and false conceptions. It is with this in mind that we have invited our honoured guest to come and present to you today's event. Is Islam a religion of peace? ? Each side will consist of two teams on my right and my left. Either member of each team can speak throughout this debate, or you could have one providing support for the other. I'll just give you brief biographies of each speaker. On my immediate left is Dr. Nabil Qureshi. He's a Christian apologist who converted from Qadianism in 2005. His conversion was a result of investigating the evidences for Qadianism, Christianity and Islam, as well as a spiritual journey involving dreams and visions. He has since attained his master's degree in Christian apologetics at Biola University in California and his medical doctorate from Eastern Virginia Medical School. He lives with his wife Michelle in Virginia. On my far left is David Wood. He is a teaching fellow in philosophy at Fordham University in New York City. A former atheist, he became a Christian after investigating the historical evidence for Jesus' resurrection. He is co-director of Acts 17 Apologetics Ministries, has been involved in more than 24 public debates with Muslims and atheists, and is a member of the Society of Christian Philosophers. David lives in the Bronx, New York, with his wife Marie and his sons Lucian, Blaze and Reed. Abdullah, on my immediate right, is a former Christian who embraced Islam at a young age, not quite sure how young, he doesn't say, and has studied Islam in 14, he says, and has studied Islam in depth since he was 18. He also has an academic background in computer science. Abdullah has had a long experience in working for Islamic revival and the establishment of Islamic Sharia in the Muslim world. His activities involve speaking at community centres, universities, colleges, and appearances on various TV programmes. He has experience in debates with atheists, secularists, and Christians, and has been involved in public and radio debates with atheists and Christians. And on my far right, at the end, over there, is Yahya. He's a former Roman Catholic who embraced Islam as a teenager, and after being tested in his faith during his studies in London, England, he devoted a solid 2-year block to investigating the evidence for Islam and Christianity. After finding that Islam stood very firmly on firm ground in comparison with Christianity, Yahya decided to become involved in Islamic apologetics. He is currently studying to finish his degree in Islamic studies at university, and is also studying traditional Islamic studies in the Shia Islamic Seminary in London. He currently lives in London with his wife and shall be leaving soon for a year in Syria to further his studies of classical Arabic. The event this evening will proceed as follows. There will be an opening presentation by both Muslim and Christian speakers on the reasons why they left their past beliefs and embraced the ones they currently profess. This will be for 30 minutes each, and Abdullah on my right here will start. Secondly, then there will be rebuttals. This will be for 15 minutes each. Then we're going to have a break for 15 minutes. Then after that there will be second rebuttals, 8 minutes each. Don't worry, I'll repeat all this after the break if you forget. You probably will. After the second rebuttals, there's a crossfire session, 20 minutes in total, 2 minutes comment and response time back and forth. And finally, we'll have questions and answers from the audience. And we've allotted an hour for that. We'll see how it goes with the timing. And then after that, a brief summary comment from each speaker. I'd like to explain a bit about the rules this evening. It says here very sternly, no one, thou shalt not shout, jeer, or disrupt the speakers while they are speaking. Anyone who wishes to make comments should save them for later, during the audience participation session, the Q&A session I mentioned. Applause is allowed at the end of each speaker's discussion. And please ensure that mobile phones, or cell phones as they're also called, are switched off or silenced for the evening. Thank you. And we'd like to remind everyone that in accordance with the Islamic principles of the Muslim Debate Initiative and the commonly understood principles of etiquette of discussion, that we should respect everyone's right to hold opinions and express them, even the most unpalatable ones, as long as they are expressed sincerely and for intellectually serious purposes, but not gratuitously and in a disrespectful fashion. We hope you enjoy this evening and gain a deeper insight into the Muslim-Christian dialogue and debate. And I'd like to pass straight over to Abdullah, our first speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Can you hear me? Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salam ala Nabi Kareem Muhammad wa ala alihi tayyibin wa sahbihi as-salihin. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming on this very nice sunny English day. It's left on a sunny English day. Basically, I'd like to start off with obviously the topic today is Islam, religion of peace. And before I discuss my main argument, I'd like to ask why this question. Why this question is Islam a religion of peace? You see, let's say hypothetically that Islam isn't a religion of peace, it's a religion of war. But let's say it comes from God. Is this an incompatible situation? Can God not? Is he unable to tell his followers to go to war? I'm sure my Jewish friend here could give you an answer to that question, because he follows the Old Testament. So this debate is not about proving Islam is whether it's from God or not, because whether Islam is mandated to fight other people or not, it is irrespective to the theologies of all the three Abrahamic faiths present in this room. The reason behind this debate is a political reason, and it's very interesting because I generally thought that a lot of evangelical Christians are apolitical, but not so the case. Maybe in America they're much more active in the political scene. I'd like to quote someone. A certain individual said, the problem is, if people are preaching a very peaceful version of Islam, then people out in the West don't know any better, or are not going to hear, are not going to believe that that Islam is peaceful. They're not going to hear any West who don't know any better. Yeah. Then people out in the West who don't know any better are going to be galvanized, and their concerns are going to be squashed. Then now you have a bunch of people who are not worried about Islam. They'll think Islam is just a very peaceful religion. I heard it from the mouths of Muslims themselves. However, they've only heard a version of Islam that is not well-founded and not well-grounded. And when Islam finally takes over, like I said earlier, there wouldn't be that peaceful version of Islam. Finally, going around preaching about the peaceful version of Islam makes people less worried about the dangers of true Islam, the violent Islam. So I kind of murdered that there, didn't I? So who said this? Was it Nick Griffin of the BNP? Was it Jean-Marie Le Pen, the right-wing guy in France? No, it was my fellow colleague over here, Nabil Qureshi. Now, here's the interesting thing. Here's the point. I find this. I'm kind of concerned by this because what's the objective going to achieve? Like Christians say, right, we're a people of peace. We only pray and so on. And say, oh, okay. So what are you going to do? All right, you've told everyone now that Islam's a religion of war. What's going to happen now? We're going to pray that it goes away? No. Actions are going to start being taken. And those actions that are going to be taken are going to lead to persecution and oppression of a minority in Europe. But you might say, but Christians don't oppress people. As individuals, they're very peaceful. I say, of course. But if you read Romans 13, as a government, when it comes to oppression, the answer is, yes, they can. Just like Obama says. And if you look at Romans 13, the leader is the wrath of God. He holds the sword. He's the punishment of God upon the people. If he punishes you, then you are deserved of it. You are an oppressive type. You are an oppressive person, or you're an evildoer. So here's what I'm concerned about. So inshallah, we're going to engage in this topic and find out whether Islam really is a religion of peace or not. and hopefully we can try to stem the tide of Islamophobia and the West's long history of demonizing its minorities, whether it be blacks, Catholics, Jews, and so on and so forth. What do you got against the many religions anyway? Well, yeah. So, the introduction to the talk, I'm going to be discussing what is a religion of peace, how is peace achieved, the Islamic method for achieving peace, and finally, conclusion that Islam is a religion of peace. So, what is a religion of peace? Well, of peace, the part of the sentence of peace has 50 meanings. If you look in a dictionary, there's actually 50 meanings. Wait, to be of peace. What does this mean? 50 meanings in a dictionary. I use the American Heritage Dictionary in honor of our guest from America. The word of, to be of something, can mean derived or coming from, caused by, resulting from the total or group comprising, composed or made from, associated with or adhering to, belonging or connected to, possessing or having, containing or carrying, specified as, named or called, centering on, directed toward, produced by, ensuing from, or characterized or identified by. So I tried to eliminate all the ones that wouldn't make any sense, and I got these following meanings. Islam could be either produced by peace, where it can't be peace doesn't produce anything except peace. Centering on or directed toward peace, that's one of the things that could be. Composed or made from peace. Well, no, peace is a sociological phenomena, whereas Islam, like every other religion or belief, is composed of ideas from revelation. It could be belonging or connected to peace, yeah, possibly. It could possess peace, possibly again, or it could be associated with or adhering to peace. Now, what is peace? And that is a very much more tricky question. What does original peace mean in today's context? It can either mean have a peaceful methodology. It could be referring to it's a project for peace in the world today. Not necessarily the methodology is peaceful, but it aims to create a peaceful world. Those are the two meanings of the word peace, or religion of peace that we could bring in today. Or ideology of peace. You can use any kind of definition you want. So what does peace mean? The absence of war or other hostilities. Fine, that's a good point. But it could be an agreement or treaty to end hostilities. It could be freedom from quarrels and disagreement, harmonious relations, so to speak. It could be public security and order, and it could be inner contentment and serenity. And also it could be used as a greeting or farewell, like saying peace. So I say salam. Now, what's the biblical meaning of the word peace? Maybe that's, let's go to the Old Testament, because I think Muslims and Christians, we have a common reference point in the Old Testament. So maybe what's the Old Testament definition of peace? There could be a divine peace from the giver of peace in the book of Judges. It says, then Gideon perceived that he was the angel of the Lord, and Gideon said, alas, O Lord God, for now I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. But the Lord God said to him, peace be to you, do not fear, you shall not die. Then Gideon built an altar there to the Lord, and called it the Lord is peace. To this day it stands at Ophrah, which belongs to the Abizirites. Pronounce that. Right, so in this case, God gives peace, gives a contentment inside you. It can mean satisfaction or contentment. In the book of Exodus, it says, if you do this and God so commands, you'll be able to stand the strain, and all these people will go home satisfied. Be shalom, satisfied. In Leviticus, it says, it refers to security, but not absence of war, funny enough. And you shall eat your bread to the full and dwell in the land securely. I will give peace in the land, and you shall lie down, and none shall make you afraid. And I will remove harmful beasts from the land, and the sword shall not go through your land. You shall chase your enemies, and they shall fall before you by your sword. 5 of you shall chase 100, and 100 of you shall chase 10,000, and your enemy shall fall before you by the sword. And this is after God has given peace in the land, that they shall conquer their enemies, after these people already have peace. So it refers to security, but not the absence of war, according to the Old Testament. Very interesting, quite an interesting point. So, according to the biblical and English language usage, the only convergence between the English language and the Bible on this is in 3 points. A religion of peace possesses an ability to grant divinely originated peace, generates satisfaction and contentment amongst its adherents, and grants security and safety. Next point, then, how is peace achieved? Peace is achieved by providing for the mental state of human beings, which is essentially satisfying the mind's requirement to believe in non-contradictory truth of the life of this world. The next point is the heart, that it will satisfy the desire to live in security and not be humiliated, which emanates from the survival instinct innate in man. The desire to start a family and relations with love with fellow human beings, which we call the procreational and all species instinct in man. The desire to connect with the higher power, otherwise called the spiritual or sanctification instinct. So these three things are part of the heart that religion must address to provide peace. Lastly, the physical: food, clothing, shelter, and the preservation of health. This also is required for peace, satisfaction, as according to the biblical definition. So people form societies, and what is required to cater for people, for human beings, is generally what we call creed, which in Islam we call iman. And this is providing a comprehensive and non-contradictory explanation of reality as a whole, a correct epistemology, meaning that you should be able to prove what you believe. This includes what came before the universe. So you have to be able to have an explanation that shows you what came before the universe, what comes after it, how you interact with what is before and what is after it, how you interact with other entities within this universe, your fellow human beings, other life forms, animate matter, should we say, and inanimate matter, which is the rest of the universe. And of course, the belief that the creed that we have should address our relationship with the higher power. Second point, that to achieve peace, what you actually must address is method. And this is what we call justice, how to actually address all these points. This justice means, or at least the method to achieve what the religion or ideology's goal is, it has to provide the rights for individuals based upon satisfying the individual's instincts to protect them in society. It must provide rights to society to protect them from criminals, recidivists, and generally those who constitute a major threat to the security, safety, and well-being of others. And lastly, it should have a mechanism in place to grant and protect these rights, which we know as a state. So, justice. Justice, I would contend, is peace. For Martin Luther King Jr. said, true peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice. And Henri Frédéric Amiel, a Swiss philosopher, poet, and critic, said, liberty, equality, bad principles. The only true principle for humanity is justice. And justice to the feeble is protection and kindness. So, what is the Islamic method for peace? How does it address the mental state of human beings? First, it gives them very simple theology. See, Surah Ikhlas, say, God is one, He is the infinite, He begets not, nor was He begotten, there is none like unto Him. So I always think that sounds very beautiful. It's a very simple proposition. Also, in Surah 51, verse 56, I have not created man or jinn except to worship me. Our purpose is to worship God. Very simple. God is one. He does not resemble His creation in any way, shape, or form. He doesn't beget or is not begotten like His creation. He is the one, the infinite, the indivisible. He has made us to worship Him. And of course, He has given us revelation. If you are in doubt of what we have revealed to our messenger, then produce one chapter like it, call upon all your helpers besides Allah, if you are truthful, in Surah 2, verse 23. So God is giving us an epistemology of how we know the truth by saying the Quran is a literary miracle which is given to the Arabs, who were people of literature, people of poetry, and is unsurpassed. The Arab grammarian, interestingly, Hamilton Glib, wrote, as a literary monument, the Quran thus stands by itself, a production unique to Arabic literature, having neither forerunners nor successors in its own idiom. Muslims of all ages are united in proclaiming the inimitability not only of its content but of its style, and enforcing the high Arabic idiom into the expression of new ranges of thought. The Quran develops a bold and strikingly effective rhetorical prose in which all resources of syntactical modulation are exploited with great freedom and originality. Also, Foster Fitzgerald Arbuthnot, a British Orientalist and translator, said, and that though several attempts have been made to produce a work equal to it, as far as eloquent writing is concerned, none yet has succeeded. So as Muslims, we have a firm basis by which we believe that we have an epistemology of what is the truth, we know what is the truth. And so it brings contentment to our mind, and hence we are at peace, because we don't have to believe in blind faith or anything, or contradictory doctrines. To the heart. The desire to live in security, not be humiliated. God tells in the Quran, we have indeed honored the children of Adam and provided for them means of transportation on land and sea and given them wholesome food and exalted them above the greater part of our creation. Man is honored by God. O you who believe, let not men among you laugh at each other. It may be that the latter are better than the former. Or let not women laugh at each other. It may be that the latter are better than the former. Or defame, nor be sarcastic to each other, nor call each other by offensive nicknames. Here's what the Quran says in 49 verse 11. So respect. The desire to start a family and love and start relations. As we know, that Islam talks about giving of charity. It says give charity to each other so that love may be formed between people. It says that getting married is complete, is half your faith. And the Quran says, and among his signs is this, that he has created for you wives from among yourselves, that you may find repose in them, and he has put between you affection and mercy. Verily, in that are indeed the signs for people who reflect. And of course, there is the desire of the heart to connect to a higher power and spiritual sanctification. Those who believe and find peace in the remembrance of God, for without doubt, in the remembrance of God do hearts find peace. Of those, and another verse, those who have faith and do good will the most gracious one, Rahman, bestow love. And again, another verse say, O Prophet, my prophets to the people, if you love God, follow me, and God will love you and forgive your sins, for God is oft forgiving, most merciful. And it goes on and on. Physical needs. This is actually a very interesting one. The economic system of Islam. The Prophet Muhammad said, the son of Adam has no better right than that he would have a house where he should live, a piece of clothing where he would hide his nakedness, and a piece of bread and some water. As Asna said, and a member of the Democratic Socialist America and Racism Watch, there are generally sufficient resources in this world to ensure that no one, nowhere, at no time should go hungry. The zakat was prescribed by Islam. It said the zakat are only for the poor and for the needy and for those employed to collect the funds and for bringing hearts together and for freeing captives or slaves, and for those in debt, and for the cause of God, and for the stranded traveller, an obligation imposed by God, and God is knowing and wise. The zakat, the redistribution of wealth in society. Also, interest is prohibited, and as we know in the Old Testament, interest is prohibited. Maybe we could avoid a credit crunch if interest didn't exist. As we know, the Christians abolished the law, the Catholics abolished the law of interest, and now look what's happened. The Protestants started with interest in Europe, and now look what's led them, boom and bust. And it's all down to the system which you employ, unfortunately, and it's not Jesus' system. The Prophet Muhammad also said, take notice of war from Allah, so the Quran says, take notice of war from Allah and His Messenger, regarding to those people who take interest, and deal not unjustly, and you shall not be dealt with unjustly. And so it talks about the prohibition of interest. And the Prophet Muhammad declared war on it because it causes an inequality in society. Islam rejects monopoly. Islam talks about the fact that it's not based on the capitalist model whereby there's meant to be infinite human needs and limited resources. And the economic problem is to maximize production as much as possible, and hopefully it will trickle down to the poor people. It doesn't happen like that. The Islamic system is completely different. It is not like communism, it's not like capitalism, it's in the middle. It acknowledges that human needs are limited. Food, clothing, shelter, like the Prophet Muhammad said, it guarantees this, and then in luxuries, it is laissez-faire. We can go into that further. That's a long talk in itself. Also, regarding the method which is justice, and how Islam deals with providing rights for individuals and providing rights for society. Now you might balk at the fact that Islam says women must be covered up, they must be modest. And so obviously, Jesus' mother was modest, and in the Old Testament the women were commanded to be modest. Even Paul commands Christians to be modest and dressed in a modest way. I wonder what Paul would say if you saw some Christians here today. No offense, I'm just giving the truth here. Daniel Bell, lecturer in political science at the University of Singapore, said, liberalism, it is claimed, contributes to, or at least does not sufficiently take into account, of the negative social and psychological effects related to the atomistic tendencies of modern liberal societies. There is undoubtedly a worrying trend in contemporary societies towards a callous individualism that ignores community and social obligations, and the liberal theory does not seem up to the task of dealing with this problem. Islam deals with this problem. The Prophet Muhammad said that people are like, the situation of people are like people on a boat, on two decks. You have some on the bottom deck and some on the top deck. And when the bottom deck want to get some water, they have to ask the top deck to deliver them some water from over the side. If the people in the bottom deck said, you know what, let's not trouble those at the top, let's make a hole in our partnership to get water directly for ourselves. If the people at top allow them to, they would all be ruined and they would be destroyed. But if the people at the top prevented them from doing so, they would all be saved. So Islam views that human beings have individual rights and responsibilities, and society has rights and responsibilities, and you have rights to society, and society has rights to you. Something that is in this individualistic society is lacking, unfortunately. Also, in terms of the state, we know that Islam has a state system. It is implemented by a state system. It is not just a theology. Now, all the points I said about the heart, Islam bringing peace to the heart, this is common to a lot of theologies. And you're probably no stranger to some of the prescriptions that Islam gives. But the difference is, Islam has a method to achieve a society based on justice and righteousness. Not just, well, individuals, you guys just be good, and hopefully the society will be good. It doesn't happen like that. It's like going down to, it's like abolishing the highway code and hoping that out of good grace, everyone doesn't crash into each other and they all drive properly. It doesn't work. They have to have highway code. There have to be regulations. It is the wisdom by which God gave us the law in the first place. The companion Umayyad bin al-Ansari, this is the answer, this is a very interesting point. He said, he's a companion of the Prophet Muhammad. He said, "O people, Islam is a mighty fortress and sturdy gate. The fortune of Islam is justice and its gate is truth. If you destroy the fortress and demolish the gate, you undermine the defenses of this religion. Islam will remain strong as long as the Sultan or central authority is strong. The strength of the Sultan neither comes from flogging the whip nor killing with the sword, but ruling with justice and holding fast to the truth." This is the basis. And of course, the verses on justice in the Quran are numerous. God commands justice and fair dealing. I'm not going to quote them, time's running out. "O you who believe, be upright for God and bear witnesses be bearers of witness with justice. O you who believe, be upholders of justice, bearing witness for God alone, even against yourselves, even as Muslims, even against ourselves. All your parents and relatives, whether you are rich or poor, God is well able to look after them. Do not follow your own desires and deviate from the truth. If you follow, turn away, God is aware of what you do. O you who believe, be steadfast, witnesses to God in justice, and let not hatred of others make you depart from doing justice. For doing justice is nearer to righteousness." Now, the question is, why does there exist punishments? It's not, oh, why is there punishments? It's horrible. Why are there punishments? This is oppressive. Really? Why are there punishments in Britain? Why are there punishments in America? The death penalty where he comes from is in America. Is that not an oppressive regime? Would you want to abolish this? Well, again, Romans 13, would say otherwise. But, as Blaise Pascal said, philosopher said, "Justice without force is powerless, and force without justice is tyrannical." So the Quran says, "And there is the saving of life for you in the law of equality in punishment. O men of understanding, that you may become pious. There is the saving of life by executing the murderers and the rapists. We prevent them from killing and raping other people." Heck, even Paul said that the reason there is a law is for the unrighteous, to basically execute the unrighteous, to persecute the unrighteous in society. Again, the issue of submission to authority in Romans 13. It's very, I just want to juxtapose this. "Everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, he who rebels against the authorities rebels against God, what God has instituted. And those who do so will bring judgment upon themselves, for rulers hold no terror for those who do right, but for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from fear of one authority? Then do what is right, and he will commend you, for he is God's servant to you to do good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword for nothing. He is God's servant, an angel of wrath, to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. Therefore, it is necessary to submit yourself to the authorities, not only because of the possible punishment, or also because of conscience. This is also why you must pay taxes, for God's authorities are God's servants," and so on and so forth. He continues. Now, to the contentious issue, which everyone likes to mention, jihad. Dun, dun, dun. Should be like some lightning when you said jihad. Sorry. Right. The jihad is about establishing justice and preventing injustice. Simply, very simply. There is a defensive jihad. To those whom against war is made, permission is given to defend themselves because they have been wronged. And very Allah is most powerful to give them victory. They are those who have been expelled from their homes in defiance of right, and so on. Another verse, fight in the cause of Allah against those who fight against you, but do not transgress the limits, the rules of warfare that Islam has given to us. Lo, Allah loves not the transgressors, and fight them until persecution is no more, and our religion is for God. For if they desist, then let them be no hostility against the transgressors. And remember, in the verse of Quran, Allah says, oppression is worse than killing. As Muslims, oppression for us, oppression is much worse than killing. Because what leads to wars, what leads to resistance and fighting around the world, and people trying to fight for their rights, is because they are oppressed. And even people will fight and die because they are oppressed. So oppression is worse than killing. So for us, we fight against oppression. Now here is the contentious issue, the offensive jihad. And what is the matter of you that you fight not in the cause of Allah, for the oppressed among men, women and children who say, our Lord, take us out of this city of oppressive people and appoint for us yourself a protector, and appoint for us from someone from yourself who is a helper, and fight them until persecution is no more, and religion is God, and so on again. And if they seek peace, then you seek peace, and trust in God, and He is the one who hears and knows all things. And another verse.
5 minutes.
Thank you. Fight those who believe not in Allah nor the last day, nor hold forbidden that which Allah has held forbidden, and His Messenger, nor Allah and His Messenger has held forbidden, nor acknowledge the religion of truth, even if they are from the people of the book, until they pay jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. Now, I mentioned the word subdued. In the Arabic, it means not to be aggressive, not to be fighty, and so on. And you know what? With Romans 13, it's excellent. Because if ever there was a situation in history where Muslims ruled over Christians, the Christians would have to accept Islamic rule as being divinely instituted according to Romans 13. And of course, we are just. The Muslims have been just. And again, I've got evidence to prove that, perhaps not in this segment, but next segment. And it talks about, then it goes on to the fact that in terms of how the Prophet treated people in the prison of war, it said you must feed them, that do not kill women, children, the infirm and elderly, and so on. People are not participate in wars, do not burn down trees, and all this is well known. The rules of warfare, the Islamic rules of warfare were instituted to prevent abuse. We were here for only one objective, and the objective is to spread justice and uproot the oppressors. Because we believe not in just conquering, getting wealth and so on. It's about being responsible. It's about being responsible for mankind. Martin Luther King said, Martin Luther King Jr. said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Now, does possessing the methodology of warfare in one of your many audiences, does it make you a religion of war and not peace? What does Thomas Aquinas say in his Summa Theologica? Those who wage war justly aim at peace, and so they are not opposed to peace, except to evil peace, which our Lord came not to send upon the earth, referring to Matthew 10:34. This is Thomas Aquinas. Augustine, in his epistle to Boniface, peace should be the object of your desire. War should be waged only as a necessity, and waged only that God may by it deliver men from necessity and preserve them in peace. For peace is not sought in order to the kindling of war, but war is waged in order that peace may be obtained. Therefore, even in waging war, cherish the spirit of the peacemaker, that by conquering those you attack, you may lead them to the advantages of peace. For our Lord says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. He's quoting this. If, however, peace among men be so sweet as procuring temporal safety, how much more is that peace with God that procures for men with the eternal felicity of the angels? Let necessity, therefore, and not your will, slay the enemy that fights you. And again, Paulo Freire says, washing one hands of the conflict between the powerful and the powerless means to side with the powerful and not be neutral. So, the issue is that if the Nazis exist, if you didn't fight against the Nazis, then they would oppress and they would massacre the Jews. My friend over here would not exist if people didn't fight against the oppressors and the people who were causing tyranny around the earth. And because in the situation where Islam came about, what governments were around it? You had oppressive feudalistic regimes, tyrannical regimes. If people say, oh, Islam was doing its jihad to convert people by the sword, was there any conversions? Was there forced conversions anywhere? I've got evidence. If the guy wants to bring it up, I'll bring up the evidences, and we'll see if there was really forced conversions. Why is there jizya? Why would they ask for a simple tax if the objective of Islam was to force convert people? People say, oh, they charge a tax. The Muslims charge tax, very bad. Oh, really? Tax? Yes. What kind of evil regime would charge tax? Damn it. Right? the people of Dhimma, the word are the non-Muslims, and the Dhimma means those under contract. It comes from the original root meaning those who are sanctified or protected. They're under contract. If you have a problem being called that term, then Rousseau called everyone here. We are all under contract. We are contractual citizens of the state, and that's what it was. Muslims don't expect you as non-Muslims, those in the audience, to fight for us or operate in our society. But interesting enough, there was a tribe which fought, and they weren't charged jizya. So I will jump to, is Islam a religion of peace? As Bernard the Wise, the pilgrim monk who visited Egypt and Palestine said during the reign of Caliph al-Mu'taz, he said, the Christians and the pagans, friends of Muslims, have this kind of peace between them that if I was going on a journey and on the way, the camel or donkey which bore my luggage were to die, and I was to abandon all my goods by any guardian and go to the city for another pack animal, when I came back I would find all my property uninjured there. Such is the peace there. And this is the peace that Islam will bring. Thank you.
Thanks, Abdullah. Are you ready to? Both mics.
Can everyone hear me from here? Yes, in the back, can you hear me? Yeah, good. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out to this debate. It's a very interesting topic, and I'd like to thank Abdullah and Yahya for the opening presentation, for attempting to show us that Islam is a religion of peace. We thank them especially for presenting their view in a forum such as this. It's rare that we get to interact with these views. A lot of times people will bring up their views, but there's never really an opportunity to challenge them.
I'd just like to say here at the beginning that I really like Abdullah's version of Islam. If he writes his own tafsir, I will help you spread that tafsir. If he comes out with his own footnotes to the Quran, I will help you spread that Quran. In the meantime, we are stuck with very different commentaries. Ibn Abbas, Ibn Kathir, we're stuck with different translations of the Quran. So I think we arrived at some different conclusions. But there are some points of formal agreement between us, some points where we agree with things that he has said. He said that modest dress is good. We have no objections to that. We agree completely, and that is something common to Islam and Christianity. He says whether Islam is violent or not is separate from whether it's true or not. And I agree completely. God could command violence if he wanted to. If he wanted a certain group judged, he could. The question is whether he has, whether Christianity is true or whether Islam is true. So if Islam is true, I'll just say, if Islam is true, I believe that some violence is required. He said that punishments aren't necessarily bad. I agree completely. I agree that we have prisons in the UK and in the United States to keep certain criminals separate from the rest of society. So we agree with all of these things, but it's on some of the other issues that we're going to have some disagreements about.
Well, you see, I kind of agreed with Abdullah when I was still a Muslim. I believed that Islam was very peaceful. That's the version of Islam I had been taught. That jihad was a jihad of the spirit and of the pen, not of the sword. That people were to live peacefully. Muhammad wouldn't hurt anyone unless they first declared war on Islam. That's what I believed. But as David said, I actually started reading the tafsir, I started reading the ahadith, and I realized that the history of Islam was entirely different. So then I started asking these questions, and recently, even as a Christian now, I ask these questions. I continually ask these questions. I went to a festival in Dearborn, Michigan a few weeks ago, and I asked the question there. Ironically enough, I was met with violence. And then a week later, I asked the same question at ISNA, the Islamic Society of North America's National Convention. Here, everyone's promoting peace. It was a very peaceful concept. Wherever you went, all the scholars who were there were saying Islam is peaceful. Islam is very peaceful. Now, I began to think, is there some level of contradiction here? In the Quran, in the Hadith, we find some peaceful passages, some violent passages. In the Seer literature, we find a lot of violence. What do we see in real life today? Unfortunately, we see a lot of violence being committed in the name of Islam. Now, just because people are committing the violence doesn't mean that that's part of Islam. Now, Muslims can take the word Islam in vain and then commit violence in its name if it's not part of Islam. But it is pretty striking to see that these people are committing tons of violence. When I stopped yesterday, I said, well, let me just see how much violence has been committed in the name of Islam in this past week. Just since I've been here in London since Wednesday, I realized that there were mass massacres, there were car bombings, church bombings, left and right, so much so that we have, in the past 5 days, 28 separate incidents reported in newspapers around the world, which show 210 people dead and over 1,900 people wounded.
So the point is, we look to the world today and we see a violent Islam being proclaimed, we see a peaceful Islam being proclaimed. And interestingly, we find the same thing when we turn to the Quran. We turn to Surah 2:256. There is no compulsion in religion. That's peaceful. Then we turn to Surah 9:29. Fight those who believe not in Allah. We look at the closing passage of Surah 109. To you be your religion and to me be my religion. Very peaceful. Then we turn to Surah 9:5. When the sacred months are over, slay the infidels wherever you find them. So we find the peaceful and violent passages going all the way back to the beginning of Islam. And the question is, how do we reconcile these? Are these simply contradictions, or is there a way to decide whether Muslims are called today to be peaceful or to be violent? That's the question before us.
And if you understand the way the Quran's revelation works, it's not necessary that in this case there's contradiction. In this very case, we have verses that say one thing and verses that say another thing, but do they contradict? Well, if you understand the doctrine of abrogation, you will understand that no, the verses don't necessarily contradict. Now, where do we find the concept of abrogation in the Quran? In chapter 2, verse 106 of the Quran, Allah says, whatever communications we cause to abrogate or cause to be forgotten, we bring one better than it or like it. In other words, we have some communications, we can cause them to be forgotten and bring ones better than it or like it. The Tafsir says, Tafsir al-Jalalain says, that this verse was revealed when the disbelievers began to deride the matter of abrogation, saying that one day Muhammad enjoins his companions to one thing, and the next day he forbids it. So people are making fun of Muhammad, saying, you said one thing the other day, and now you're saying something else. Then chapter 2, verse 106 comes. We see a Wahidi saying, Muhammad is mocking his companions. One day he commands them to do something, and the next day he forbids them from doing it, or brings instead something which is easier. He is nothing but a calumniator who says things of his own invention. In response to this claim that Wahidi records, chapter 16, verse 101 states, and when we change one communication for another communication, Allah knows best what He reveals. They say, you are only a forger. Nay, most of them do not know. So in these two sections of the Quran, we have statements which clearly state, hey, at one point we said one thing, now we can say something else. If only you had the understanding of Allah, you would know that it is a good thing. So these are the ways we can solve the issue. First, since Muhammad is the best interpreter of the Quran, we can see what role violence played in Muhammad's life. If he interprets the Quran the best through his life, let's see what role violence played in his life. Second, we can examine the Quran and Ahadith to see if they clearly tell us what to do in cases of peace and violence.
All right, so let's begin by taking a look at the life of Muhammad and seeing what we can gather about violence in Islam. Muhammad believed that he was called to be a prophet around the year 610, and for a while he didn't preach openly, he preached in private. But after a while he did begin preaching openly. He started telling the pagan tribes that their religion was false and that they were going to go to hell if they didn't believe in Allah. And eventually the pagans started persecuting the Muslims. Now, almost every Muslim I run into looks at this period of history and says, how dare these people persecute Muhammad? How intolerant of these people. I'd like to review a few facts here. One, the Meccans were fine with Muhammad preaching Islam at the beginning, as long as he wasn't condemning everyone else's gods. It was very pluralistic. Muslims and pagans, they were fine until Muhammad started openly saying that their religion was false. So the source of the conflict here at the beginning was Muhammad criticizing the religion of others. Other than that, they would have been fine. 2, the first blood that was shed between the two groups was shed by a Muslim. Muslims and pagans got into a fight, and a Muslim named Sa'd picked up the jawbone of a camel and hit someone with it, and this was the first blood shed in the conflict between the Meccans and the Muslims. 3, even in Mecca, Muslims began responding violently when people criticized Muhammad. When Muhammad's relative Hamza heard that Abu Jahl had insulted Muhammad, he hit Abu Jahl with a bow and said, "Will you insult him when I follow his religion?" And say what he says, "Hit me if you can." 4, even in Mecca, Muhammad was planning to conquer Arabia. When the Meccans came to Abu Talib to talk to him about Muhammad, they said, "You know the trouble that exists between us and your nephew. So call him and let us make an agreement that he will leave us alone and we will leave him alone. Let him have his religion and we will have ours." They were trying to arrive at a peaceful solution. Muhammad responded, "You may give me one word by which you shall rule the Arabs and subject the Persians to you." He said that if they recite the Shahada, they would rule over the Arabs and the Persians. So even in Mecca, when it's just a small group of Muslims, the idea is once we get everything together, we're going to go conquer the Persians, conquer the entire Arabian Peninsula. 5, Muhammad preached against the religious beliefs of the people of Mecca for 10 years, and he survived. Would I last 10 years if I preached against the religion of the people of Mecca today? If I went to Mecca today and started openly criticizing the religious beliefs of the inhabitants of Mecca, would I make it 10 years? Would I make it 10 months? 10 days? If I stood outside the Kaaba like the Muslims were doing, condemning the religion of the people there, would I last 10 minutes? I don't believe I would.
10 seconds.
And Muslims condemn the pagans for their intolerance when they allowed Muhammad to do this for 10 years. 6, when Muhammad was still in Mecca, he walked into the Kaaba one day, walked around it, and then walked up to the people of Mecca and said, "Verily, O Qureshi, I bring you slaughter." He announced to the people while he was still there that he was going to bring them slaughter. 7, when the Meccans tried to kill Muhammad. Oh, look, they tried to kill Muhammad. How intolerant. Why did they try to kill Muhammad? Well, he had already announced to them that he was going to bring them slaughter. When we read in Ibn Asad, when the Qureshi saw that the apostle had a party and companions not of their tribe and outside their territory, and that his companions had migrated to join them and knew that they had settled in a new home and had gained new protectors, they feared that the apostle might join them, since they knew that he had decided to fight them. Muhammad announces that he's going to slaughter people. He goes and starts building alliances with other tribes, and he decides he's going to move out of Mecca. The Meccans say, "He's going to fight us." And they even tried to come up with it. They thought of confining him. They said, "No, if we confine him, all these people are just going to attack us." And so they decided to kill. Now, in all of the history, in those 10 years, 2 people were killed. 2 Muslims were killed. People were tortured. People were persecuted. I don't agree with persecution. I don't agree with killing anyone. But it's important to keep in mind the distinction here. When the Meccans were in control, things didn't go as nearly as bad as they did for the pagans later on when Muslims were in control, or the Jews when Muslims were in control. So we have a very different picture here.
So the pagans did persecute the Muslims, not too poorly. Yes, 2 people died. That's horrible. 13 other people were injured. That's over a course of the whole time Islam was in Mecca before going to Medina. 15 total people, according to the records. And, well, at the end of this, when Muhammad had a chance to leave, we know that the tribal leaders sent men to kill Muhammad the very last night before he flew to Medina. That time that he had when he was leaving, this was his opportunity to start a period of peace. Finally, he's no longer being persecuted. Finally, he can go to Medina and live in peace. Finally, he has the chance to show what Islam is really made of, if it is the religion of peace. But what happened? Muhammad leaves, he goes to Medina, and immediately he starts planning on how to raid caravans. Now, as Muhammad gets there, he notices one thing, and that is that when people send caravans out from Mecca, they invest their funds into it, and when these funds come back after having done their trading in far-off places, then people will receive the money, and that's the money off which they will live. So Muhammad knows that if attacking these caravans is successful, he's cutting off the lifeblood of the Meccans. So he plans an attack. He doesn't lead it himself. He plans one. He sends people out. It fails. They come back. He sends them out again later. They shoot arrows this time, but it fails. They come back again. A third attack happens. It fails as well. Now Muhammad says, I'm in charge. Let's go together. Muhammad goes for a fourth raid. It fails. A fifth raid, it fails. The sixth raid fails. Now it's the seventh raid. And in the seventh raid, we find ourselves in the holy month which all the people of Saudi Arabia subscribe to. No one would ever believe that someone would dare attack anyone during the holy month. Muhammad, again, has sent his people out. The first person who's in line for this fight has shaved his head as part of the symbolism of subscribing to the holy month. So he looks like a pilgrim. He doesn't look like a warrior at all. The caravan sees this and they say, well, this man is just a pilgrim. They don't fear him. Well, this was just part of the trap. The Muslims then attacked the caravan during the holy month. A man was killed. And this is the initiation of battles in Islam. This is how Badr then later happened. Then we see, after that, the battles of Uhud, the battle of the trench, we see the battle of Khaybar. We see all sorts of battles happening from then on out. So when Muhammad finally had a chance to start peace, what do we know? He initiated battles that became never-ending during his lifetime.
So if we turn to the life of Muhammad, we see that when Muhammad was outnumbered in Mecca, the call was to peace. Later on, when Muhammad had an army around him, there was non-stop fighting until he died. So as far as the life of Muhammad is concerned, it would seem that the final marching orders of Muhammad are to fight. Now, if we turn to the Quran, we can confirm this. We can confirm this through the Quran and through Muslim commentators. Muslims in the West are quick to point to passages like Surah 2:256. There is no compulsion in religion, as if this and a couple other peaceful passages in the Quran somehow provide the Muslims with their final marching orders. What they don't tell us is that, according to Muslim commentators, this verse has been abrogated. It was canceled by verses that came later. Ibn Kathir, considered by many Muslims to be the greatest Quranic commentator of all time, says that 2:256 was abrogated by verses like 973, 9:123, and 48:16, which call for fighting. Ibn Kathir says, therefore all people of the world should be called to Islam. If any one of them refuses to do so, or refuses to pay the jizya, they should be fought till they are killed. This is everyone is to be called and then fought until they're killed or until they pay the jizya. Surah 9:29 says this, fight those who believe not in Allah nor the last day, nor hold that forbidden which hath been forbidden by Allah and His Messenger, nor acknowledge the religion of truth from among the people of the book, Christians and Jews, until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. Notice what this says. It doesn't say fight the oppressors. It doesn't say fight people who are attacking you. It says fight those who do not believe. These are people who have different beliefs from you, therefore you attack them.
And the next verse makes that clear, by the way.
Oh yes, Surah 9:30. That's where, according to Ibn Kathir, the reason for fighting the Jews and Christians is given. So the answer is found, and the Jews say Uzair is the son of Allah, and Christians say the Messiah is the son of Allah. These are the words of the mouths. They imitate the saying of those who disbelieved before. May Allah destroy them, how they are turned away. Ibn Kathir says, fighting the Jews and Christians is legislated because they are idolaters and disbelievers. Allah encourages the believers to fight the disbelieving Jews and Christians who uttered this terrible statement and utter lies against Allah the Exalted. As for the misguidance of Christians over Isa, it is obvious. So why fight us? Because we're attacking? No, because we say Jesus is Lord.
Is this us saying this? Absolutely not. It's a verse from the Quran being interpreted by one of the greatest commentators of Islamic history, Ibn Kathir.
Now, so Muslims are clearly called to fight, but it's clear that Muslims didn't always fight. So when are Muslims allowed to seek peace? According to Surah 3:28, if Muslims feel threatened by a stronger adversary, they're allowed to pretend to be friendly for a time. As Ibn Kathir says, in this case, such believers are allowed to show friendship outwardly, but never inwardly. One of Muhammad's companions, Abu Darda, put it this way: we smile in the face of some people, though our hearts curse them. So if you're outnumbered in Mecca, or if you're outnumbered in a Western society where Islam is not the dominant religion, you pretend to be peaceful. But what if Muslims are in a position of power? Well, then the ruling changes. We read in Surah 47:35, "Be not weary and faint-hearted, crying for peace when you should be uppermost." According to Ibn Kathir again, this means that Muslims shouldn't compromise, seek peace, or end fighting with non-Muslims when Muslims are in a position of power. Well, Ibn Kathir, when are Muslims, again, allowed to be peaceful? He tells us, if the disbelievers are considered more powerful and numerous than the Muslims, then the Imam may decide to hold a treaty if he judges that it entails a benefit for Muslims. Are you noticing a pattern here? If Muslims are strong, they're told to fight everyone. If they're weak, they're told to pretend to be friendly and to seek a temporary peace while they build up enough strength to attack. Is this a religion of peace? This is a religion that pretends to be peaceful so long as people aren't strong enough to conquer.
Now, I noticed some people in the audience are shaking their heads, and I can understand that because I was in your shoes once. Maybe David and I are interpreting things entirely incorrectly. Maybe we're looking at the Quran, and since we're not Muslims, we are misinterpreting everything. Well, I think what I've been told from day one, when I don't understand the Quran, I should turn to Hadith. I should see from the Hadith what we find. Does the life of Muhammad, as shared by Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim, corroborate that which I'm saying, or does it show an opposite opinion? Well, let me show you from Sahih Bukhari, starting from Sahih Bukhari, verse number 6924. I have been ordered to fight the people till they say, none has the right to be worshipped but Allah. And whoever says, La ilaha illallah, Allah will save his property and his life from me. So I've been ordered to fight people until they say La ilaha illallah. That's 6924. Sahih Muslim number 30. I have been commanded to fight against people so long as they do not declare La ilaha illallah. But are these solitary occasions? Is this just something in general, or is fighting in Islam not an afterthought? Is it something that's prescribed to people as main, a core of the religion? If we look at Sahih Bukhari number 2785, a man came to Allah's messenger and said, guide me to such a deed as equals jihad. And Muhammad said, I find no such deed. In 2796, the Prophet said, a single endeavor of fighting in Allah's cause in the afternoon or the forenoon is worth more than the entire world and whatever is in it. Fighting, worth more than the world and whatever is in it. 2795, the Prophet said, nobody who dies and finds good with Allah would wish to come back to this world, even if you were given the whole world and whatever is in it, except the martyr, who, upon seeing the superiority of martyrdom, would wish to come back to this world and die again. So, what I'm seeing here is, it doesn't seem to be that fighting is just an afterthought or a supporting issue. It's a matter of the very core. It's better than everything there is. There's no better deed than fighting. And dying for Allah's cause is not just something Muhammad is saying abstractly. This is not a metaphorical concept. In fact, Muhammad makes extremely clear, even about himself. He says in Sahih Bukhari number 2797, by him in whose hand my soul is, I would love to be martyred in Allah's cause, and then come back to life, and then get martyred, and come back to life, and get martyred, and come back to life, and get martyred. So Muhammad is not saying this in some sort of metaphorical sense. He's saying, I would love to fight and die, and fight and die, and fight and die.
So we've looked at the life of Muhammad, and we see a clear progression towards violence. We've looked at Quranic passages, and when we look at the commentators, the peaceful passages are the earlier passages, and Muhammad's final marching orders, by the way, Surah 9, where we find the command to fight those who do not believe, is either the last or next to last surah revealed. These are Muhammad's final marching orders. So the Quran agrees with us. When we turn to Islam's greatest commentators, we find that the peaceful passages have been abrogated and that Muhammad's final marching orders were to fight everyone. And when we turn to the Hadith, we find that Muhammad was commanded to fight people until they recite the Shahada. Everything is in agreement on this issue. And yet, our friends disagree with us. Our Muslim friends, Abdullah and Yahya, disagree with us. Abdullah says, what is peace? He gave several different definitions. And I would agree that a religion can be peaceful in various ways. For instance, he says that a religion can provide mental peace. I don't have any objections there. I do have an objection that you provide mental peace by giving a simple theology. The simplest theology is atheism. don't necessarily think that makes it the most peaceful mentally. He says that Islam does not seek to humiliate people. Well, again, the commentators would disagree. As-Suyuti, he gives several definitions of what the Muslims were to do to the dhimmis, how these dhimmis were to be treated. Ibn Abbas says that state of abasement, when it says that we are to be in a state of abasement, means that we are pushed. They push us around. Ibn Abi Hatim transmitted that. It is transmitted that Al-Mughira told Rastam, I call you to Islam or else you must pay the jizya while you are in a state of abasement. He said, I know what jizya means, but what does a state of abasement mean? He replied, you pay it while you are standing and I am sitting and the whip is hanging over your head. Abu Shaykh related that Sa'id ibn Musaid said, I prefer that the people of the Dhimma become tired by paying the jizya, since he says, until they pay the jizya with their own hands in a state of complete abasement. It is used as proof by those who say that it is taken in a humiliating way, and so the taker sits and the dhimmi stands with his head bowed and his back bent. The jizya is placed in the balance and the taker seizes his beard and hits his chin. This is how dhimmis were to be treated. We're to come to you crawling on all fours, you're to grab us by our beards, wouldn't work with me, and then hit us in our chins. This is not supposed to be humiliating, but this is what Islam's greatest commentators say. This is what we find from Ibn Abbas and As-Suyuti.
And why are they saying this? Because of the verse in the Quran, 9:29, where it says, they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. So it's not commentators coming up with things. This is coming from their interpretation of the Quran. No, I have some responses. Abdullah also mentioned a quotation from me from while I was in ISNA. That was a week ago, and I posted a comment based on what I was seeing and the problems of preaching a peaceful Islam in light of the fact that all of the early history says something different. As part of that quotation, as part of that response, I believe it was part of the response, anyway, I could be wrong, he quotes a verse where he says, oppression is worse than slaughter. That is a verse from the Quran, chapter 2, verse 217. Let me give you the whole verse. He didn't quote the whole verse. The whole verse says, they asked thee concerning fighting in the prohibited month, i.e., they're asking you about fighting during the sacred month. Say, fighting therein is a grave offense, but graver is it in the sight of Allah to prevent access to the path of Allah, to deny Him, to prevent access to the sacred mosque, and drive out its members. Tumult and oppression are worse than slaughter. So what was the context of that? The context was, it's okay for you to kill someone during the holy month. That was revealed right after the Nakhla raid that I had mentioned, which was the start of the series of battles that Muhammad induced.
One more point on Abdullah pointed out that the jizya was a simple tax, and it's okay because everyone pays taxes. Let me read one passage for you. Sahih al-Bukhari, number 2338. Umar expelled the Jews and Christians from Hijaz. When the messenger had conquered Khaybar, he wanted to expel the Jews from it as its land became the property of Allah, His messenger, and the Muslims. Allah's messenger intended to expel the Jews, but they requested to let them stay there on condition that they would do the labor and get half the fruits. What was the jizya there? They had to pay half of everything they produced on their land. Is that a simple tax? That's quite a bit. And when we look at various sources, we can see how much. There was no set dhimmi tax. It's whatever you could get out of people without them rioting or something. And in many cases, we find 25%, 50%, and so on. This is in Sahih al-Bukhari.
So we only have 3.5 minutes left. I'd like to briefly mention the fact that violence, as we see it in Islam, is not just directed towards unbelievers. So far, we've been talking about unbelievers, but it's also directed towards many other people. And it seems that in many cases the solution to problems is just simply violence. When it comes to apostates, if we look in Sahih Bukhari, number 6921, it says female apostates should be killed. 6922 says that anyone who leaves Islam must be killed. 6923 says that Muhammad ordered apostates to be killed. 6924, as you recall, this was 4 in a row. 6924 said, I've been ordered to fight the people till they say La ilaha illallah. What about 6930? It says Muslims who kill apostates will have a reward on the day of resurrection.
I don't think I could ever have mental peace in an area where I'm not free to believe whatever I want about God. We don't just see this with regard to apostates, we see the same thing with regard to critics. Again, even when Muhammad was in Mecca, his followers would respond violently when Muhammad was criticized. When they actually had more power, this became more severe. So we see Abu Afaq, a man who was more than 100 years old, being killed brutally for criticizing Islam. Asma, when she saw this, when she saw what Muslims did to this man, she wrote a poem inviting people to stand up against Muhammad. She was brutally killed for this. We see over and over again people being killed for criticizing Muhammad. Now think about this. Muhammad was free to say anything he wanted about any of the pagans, any of their gods, any of their forefathers, anything he wanted, and you're horrible and intolerant if you react to that. But you say one word against Muhammad and you deserve death. Why the inconsistency?
I'd also like to point out that and this is a very sore topic for many people, and we don't have too much time left anyway, but I do want to open it up for discussion in case it comes up in the rest of this debate. Violence towards women is not something that's unheard of in Islam by any means. We have chapter 4, verse 34 of the Quran, which of course says, if you fear disobedience on their part, first leave them alone in their sleeping places, then, did I say that wrong? First admonish them, then leave them alone in their sleeping places, and finally beat them. There's various interpretations of this. If you want to discuss it, we can.
Read the whole verse.
And if they desist from disobedience, then you have nothing to hold against them, sure. But hitting is permitted. I heard at the last conference I was at, Isna, that it is a mutawatir hadith that Muhammad never hit any woman in his whole life, and we should use his example. Well, I approached the sheikh who said that, and I said, could you please explain to me, Sahih Muslim number 2127, where Muhammad hit Aisha, causing her pain. He looked at me and said, I did not know of such a hadith, which is there, Sahih Muslim 2127. So we can discuss this if need be. I think it's time for me to wrap up. There's 30 seconds left, and I would like to simply say this. I hope David and I are wrong. I hope our interpretation of Islam is entirely false. I hope we can lose this debate tonight. The fact of the matter is, we don't think so, and that's why we're here tonight. But if Abdullah and Yahya can show us that Islam is peaceful, we will be thankful, and that's hopefully what will happen. If not, though, I would like you all to reconsider what you think about Islam, whether it is actually the religion of peace.